Howdy, folks. Finding the right FinOps job can be a daunting task, but fear not. In this video, I'll be sharing my personal experiences, expert advice, and tried and true strategies that will help you land that coveted FinOps position. So now we're on to the hard part. You've got the certification in the bag and you're ready to jump in and start doing FinOps, but how do you actually get that job? Today, I'm going to cover 3 pillars to kind of put a framework around how you might approach that. First off, we do your research, understand where you're going, to understand what you need to do. Then we look at building your network. The more you're known in the industry, the better chance you have of getting that job. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is building that knowledge. So a cert on a piece of paper is one thing, but being able to demonstrate that knowledge in an interview or discussion is an entirely different ballgame. So that's what we're going to cover today. So first off, research and self-awareness. To understand where you're going first is essential. So you need to begin with the end in mind. I would advise doing this by just something as simple as looking at the FinOps jobs board, which I'm going to link to below, which gives you an indication of what hiring managers are looking for. You'll see commonality across some of the specifications. So especially if you're coming from a non-technical background, you're looking at those FinOps analyst type roles, and you'll start to see some common knowledge or common requirements come up across them. So things that you might see would be experience with stakeholder engagement, collaboration across functions, that kind of language, because as we've covered in the last number of weeks, collaboration and building that culture of FinOps is an essential part that can't necessarily be taught in a textbook. So you need to be able to think about how you're going to build that skill. Another one might be they ask for a base cloud provider certification, whether that be AWS, GCP, or Azure. So understanding what the common cloud certifications that people are looking for some of these specs are, if they're required or if they're a necessity, and then being able to kind of plan your learning accordingly. Then you know what you know what you don't know, but you need to build a plan, an actionable plan on how you're going to address those skills. So I would advise pausing the video now, taking a pen and writing down the top 10 things you could do to address these gaps and to build your knowledge to get a role in FinOps. When you've made a list of the top 10, cross out the bottom 7 and just focus on the top 3, because you need to have a focused approach to actually move the needle on any of these and to keep that momentum going. So as you knock one off the list, you'll get a bit of a buzz and it'll kind of inspire you to do the next. I could talk about goal setting, a whole different ball game, but I won't get lost down that rabbit hole. But just make sure that any gaps you've identified, you have actionable steps to address those. Next up, speaking of actionable steps, building your network is a very easy one to take. Once you get your certification in place, you get access to the FinOps Foundation Slack channel. This is effectively your finger on the pulse of what's going on in FinOps. It's quite a busy channel. There's a lot going on with a lot of different groups within it. So there's ones around even introductory, where people that are starting out in FinOps introduce themselves. There's ones for different clouds. So if you have a specific interest in one cloud, you can focus on the conversation there. If there's any releases or changes that are impacting FinOps practitioners, all of that will come to fruition here. There's also links to events that are going on, which is another good way, which feeds into a way to build your network, and also working groups, which is what I'm going to speak about now. So working groups are kind of open source communities where FinOps practitioners from across different companies come together to address a specific challenge. An example of one, there's the sustainability or the green ops working group who are trying to get better metrics around carbon emissions from cloud providers. And those participants are coming together to try and solve that and provide a framework. I myself have just finished up on a working group on usage optimization, which is a really good learning experience and also to build that network. So I would highly advise that. One thing I would say is don't spread yourself too thin. If you are passionate about something, pick one and stick with it. Don't try and do 3 and drop out, because I've seen that with working groups I've been involved in the past, you might have 30 people on the first call, but for finish, there's like 4. But you want to be one of the people left at the end, because that shows your consistency and builds that network. There's 2 levels of contribution then to a working group. You can be a participant, which is someone who's come to the meetings and offered their opinion on different things, or else there's a contributor who takes things to the next level. They might write some documentation or contribute in a more meaningful way. So when you're just starting off, you're just aiming to be a participant, to absorb the information and apply your lens. Like, everyone has something to bring to the table. So even someone from a non-technical background starting off has something to offer. So don't be daunted and just get involved. But as I say, pick and stick is key there. Excuse me. Then there's the FinOps Summit, or regional call. So the summit happens every couple of months, I think. I'm not 100% sure the cadence, but that's a call run by the FinOps Foundation where they talk about all things FinOps. So if they might have a guest speaker talk about a specific initiative they're working on, some of the working groups might report on some output that they've generated, and any number of things. If there's a FinOps survey, they'd feedback on that. The historical summits are available on YouTube. I'll link to the last 3 so that you've got one spot there that you can kind of get started and see what they entail. There's also some regional calls. So I know there was an EMEA one a month or 2 ago that I jumped on. It's a good way to get to know people in a smaller group, especially when it's kind of regional based. You might have more in common. So that's a good place to start as well, to start building that network and just listen in and hear what people are talking about. There's also meetups as well that happen. I've not been to one of those, but if you are FinOps certified, you get priority for attending those. So that's worth checking out also. Finally, last but definitely not least, is LinkedIn. So this is freely available to everyone. Chances are you're probably on it already. What you're wanting to do is build your focus on FinOps. So if this is the way you want to go down, start connecting with people who are in FinOps, start absorbing their content and their posts, start commenting on them if there is something relevant that you feel you can add to the conversation, and just start just by kind of looking at that and by curating your LinkedIn feed. By osmosis, you'll start to speak the language will become more familiar. The challenges will become more familiar. So then, when you're talking to someone in an interview, and they speak about focus, for example, and what that will bring for having that common language across multiple cloud providers, you have a couple of perspectives to bring to the conversation. So that's definitely something worth doing. Next up is build your knowledge. So having a network is great. People will know you, they'll recognize your name, but you need to be able to demonstrate the value you can add. First up is by communication. So as I mentioned at the top, FinOps is all about building that culture of understanding, bringing together the FinOps personas, finance, procurement, engineering, product owners. All of those people need to be able to talk together, and you need to be able to facilitate that. So you can build that skill within your current role. Maybe you're a finance business partner. What structures have you in place to have better conversations there? Do you run a quarterly business review? Do you prepare some monthly variance analysis that drives action? Think about what you're doing there and how that might tie in with FinOps as you're doing it, and how you might speak to that in an interview. The second piece is around a basic cloud certification. So even if you don't go as far as getting the exam, I would highly recommend even doing the training, and maybe doing it a couple of times, because being able to speak the language is massive within cloud. If you're in an interview and someone starts talking about EC2 compute and storage costs and S3 buckets, and you're completely lost, it's not a good look. And the information is there for free. So I would really advise doing that certification, because when you do get in the role and you are talking to engineers, they're happy to educate and bring you to the next level, but you need that base layer of understanding and that common dialect that we spoke about in last week's episode. So having that cloud cert demonstrates it externally that you have the knowledge, but also in an interview, having that dialect and being able to talk about it makes a massive difference. And another thing then to think about is adding a differentiator. So FinOps is more lucrative than your traditional finance or business analyst role, so everyone's going to want to go into it. So if there's 20 CVs that a hiring manager receives, what makes you stand out from everyone else? So what's your differentiator? Would it be that you have advanced analytics skills? Can you tackle big data sets? Are you very good at doing data visualization and bringing a story to life, for example? What's an example of when you've done that? Can you do some basic coding like Python, or is there any other scripts or SQL scripts that you can build to aggregate and display the data in a new way? These are all different differentiators to think about when you're building up that knowledge to get you ready to get that job. So to recap, what we've covered today is the research and self-awareness piece, understanding what the jobs look like and what your gaps are that you need to address. Then building your network. So who are the people in the FinOps community that you want to be connected to become known, and even to understand what the role entails a bit more so you're better informed. Then there's building your knowledge. So by having a better knowledge, you're able to talk more intelligently in an interview about the relationships you've built with stakeholders, your basic cloud understanding, or that differentiator that sets you apart from everybody else. Next week, I have my very first interview for the channel where I'm going to be talking to Lewis Cowell, where he's a recruiter in FinOps specifically, the first one globally. And we're going to talk about stuff like what advice would he give someone from a non-technical background getting started in FinOps, and what does he see the current state of the FinOps jobs market being, and stuff like that. So it'll be a fairly casual conversation, but make sure to tune in, like and subscribe and all that sort of stuff so you know where to catch it when it comes out. And I'll chat to you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.